Welcome back to another episode of In Swineversation, life-altering medical diagnosis, career pivoting, and growth with Brooke Taylor. Brooke, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for letting me hang out with you today.
Well, before we talk about your incredible career, take me back to July 22nd, 2019, the day you gave birth to your daughter.
Sure. So I was 38 weeks pregnant, and a few days before, after it was my first pregnancy, my only pregnancy, and I noticed that as my belly grew, I had some weird things happening with my breasts, and my doctors told me it was no big deal. It was part of being pregnant. And on my 38-week appointment, I took my shirt off, very mama bear style, and said, I'm not leaving until you feel this. It was a Thursday. On Friday, I met with a breast health specialist who took a biopsy right there. And I'd like to think, hopefully, I'm the only 38-week pregnant female and that he's ever had to do that to. He had an excellent poker face. That was a Friday. And then Monday morning, he called me back at 8 a.m. and said, I'm sorry, kiddo, it's cancer. And my whole world changed. That was at 8 o'clock, and at right around 2, I became a mom. I welcomed my daughter into the world. And man, that day was so wild. And I mean, there were a few things that stick out to me about that day. First, meeting my daughter. I didn't know that she was a girl until she was born. We thought that that's the surprise we were going to have on the day she was born. Second, I remember calling my dad, and I made sure he pulled over, which was kind of a bigger lift because he was pulling the trailer to the stockyards, some cattle. So that was a big pullover moment for him. And then the other was I had to call my one of my contractors for my consulting business as I pushed my suitcase into the hospital and said, "Hey, you should let our clients know I'm going on maternity leave early. Also, I have cancer. Please handle that by." It just the juggling of all of the chaos of what in the world happened. And honestly, I think shock is the only way I got through that day.
So basically what happened the same day you gave birth, you were diagnosed with stage 2B triple negative breast cancer.
Yes, sir.
So what went through your mind? How did you get through it? And what kept you strong? Like that must be something incredible to deal with beyond the happiest day of your life, along with the most tragic in a way too.
So at a base, that day was my greatest dreams coming true and also my worst fear. And I mean that literally. My father passed away from colon cancer when he was 25 years old. So I grew up knowing that early graduations to heaven are part of some people's stories. And I had told my husband in the dating stage that my greatest fear was that I would get cancer someday and I would have to leave my kids. And then there it happened. And in some ways, I felt like my entire life trained me for that moment because I had been the kid. And so in that moment, I never felt closer to my dad because I never understood until I did. And through the entire, people like to call it a journey with cancer, I found that there are so many times that it's not one or the other. It's not good or bad. It's good and bad. It's your best day and your worst day. They can coexist and you can find the silver linings throughout any of it. I did have the entire breast cancer treatment buffet, as I like to call it. That means my child was 7 days old and I had a PET scan, which means I had to quarantine from her before people use the word quarantine. I did 4 different types of chemo. I had a few staph infections and surprise surgeries and the shingles, which I too young for cancer, but definitely too young for the shingles. And I had an amputation, and I I had 5 weeks of radiation. I did the whole shebang. And what I decided was I have to be there no matter what. And I have to do that because this girl deserves to have a mom. And she's the reason I could do it. And I could do it every day, even when I didn't want to. But because I had to do it no matter what, I could either do it with a smile or I could go in there like a curmudgeony classic character from all of our favorite TV shows. And I chose to have a good time. I know that sounds silly. And you can't really decide to do that until you're faced with that. And goodness, I hope none of your listeners are faced with it, but I just chose to.
So you're dealt that hand and you chose to kind of rise above and upward. What's one word to describe that day?
Unfair.
So,
And I say that knowing everyone says life isn't fair, but you would think life would be gracious enough to give a new mom an opportunity to be a mom for just a minute. And when I think about that day now, that's what I would say. I would say then I would have said, I probably would describe it much differently. And if we're being honest, I don't know if I could have described it that day. It felt surreal.
so that was 2019, and then things got better.
Yep. So after everything, I went back to it. I went back to my life as a strategic communications consultant. I have the joy of having a really incredible clients in the ag industry. And I went back to being a career girl. I went back to, you know, tailoring conversations and reputations for food and ag organizations. And after 2 years, it came back, and statistically, it was not supposed to come back. And in fact, my oncologist said, "You're not supposed to be here." We did everything correctly. I had a complete response to chemo, which meant at the time of my amputation, there was no residual anything left. I was a perfect cancer student, but it came back. And it came back in my neck, my clavicle, my spine, my ribs, my lungs, and nearly half of my pelvis. And that was March 11th of 2022, which happened to be the anniversary of the day my dad graduated to heaven, because he took colon cancer down with him.
And this was on Christmas Day.
So I felt it on Christmas Day. I was leaving my family's ranch in Perkins, Oklahoma, and while sitting in the passenger seat, just kind of touching my neck, there was a swollen lymph node. And my family was sick. It was Christmas time. We had a toddler. She was 2, and she had the sniffles. I was like, oh, that's probably what it is, right? Like we're all just kind of gross. But then it didn't go away. I did a round of antibiotics, and then I kind of knew. I did a speaking engagement in Western Kansas, and while driving home with a friend from that event, it was a 9-hour drive home, and people were tagging me in photos while I was on stage. And I remember looking at those photos and showing my friend, I was like, is this what I look like? Is this me? Like, these do not look like the family photos we just had taken. I know that we're all overly critical of ourselves, but I was swollen. And I think sometimes when we look in the mirror, we see what we want to see. So I was thinking, oh, I'm cute and curvy. But when I saw those pictures, I knew, oh, something is broken. Something is broken, and it is broken, and it was. And my body was just inflamed because of all the cancer we did not know. And I'll tell you, my surgeon and my oncologist did ask, they were like, are you not in pain? You should be in pain. And I wasn't, and I haven't been. And I think that goes back to life as kind of a ranch girl. I think this ag industry and food industry, we just have such a high pain tolerance because we're hard workers. And so I don't think I ever slowed down long enough to know that I was or was not in pain.
So when this happened the second time, your first thought was your 2-year-old might not remember you. So you were working on creating memories and memorabilia for your daughter, Elise.
Elsie, yes.
Awesome.
So I immediately thought, this cancer is everywhere. Honestly, it was everywhere. And I thought, there's no way I'm making it out of this. Statistically, with metastatic triple negative breast cancer, your prognosis is about 13 months, and that's with treatment. And so statistically, I knew I didn't have a really good shot. And if she was two, then she wasn't going to remember my voice. And how is she going to know what I stand for, what I value, what's important to me? And I know, as being the kid, that people only tell you the best about someone. They will someone who graduates to heaven early is automatically a superhero, and that is not helpful to a small girl trying to create her way into the world. She needs to know the real me. So I lobballed, kind of softball lobbed to a friend. I was like, if only there were a way to like create a foundation or something that I could put into the world, these ripples that she could not escape what I value so much in the world. And within 2 weeks, we had launched a foundation. It's the Rural Gone Urban Foundation, which my consulting business is Rural Gone Urban. Those are my social handles. And that name came from when I graduated college. My roommate and I started a blog called Rural Gone Urban because we were rural girls living in urban Oklahoma City. And this foundation has given this opportunity that there's no way Elsie could outrun loving without an asterisk with this, which is so important to me.
But one of the things is you look for silver linings. So a lot of people see this as a tragedy. You're trying to find the silver linings in this. Can you share some of that with us?
Absolutely. So the first thing is there are so many people I've met in the past almost 4 years that I would not have met otherwise. Also, one of my greatest fears when I became pregnant is that some of my clients and the organizations and businesses I worked with wouldn't want to work with me because they would decide what capacity I had now that I was a new mom. And then there I was sitting in the chemo chair having conference calls with a corporate communications team for an animal pharma company, and no one cared because they valued who I was as a person. And a silver lining was just the clarity that came with knowing, just really seeing life through instead of black and white, just seeing it very Roy G. Biv.
Yeah, well, again, we got a lot to talk about, but I have to give you credit because you were a career woman before. You had a great career. You went through the tragedy. You're married, you have kids, and you continue to power through even today and tell the story. So I think, people should applaud that. So you live your life in 3-month increments now.
I do. So I'll tell you, if you're new to this story, I was given the opportunity to take a really new medicine. It's called a PARP inhibitor. And basically, I did ask my oncologist, does this medicine make me a GMO? And he said maybe yes, because this medicine affects every single cell in my body, and it attacks where I have a mutation on my BRCA1 gene, and so it attacks each cell on that gene and how it recreates. And so basically, anyway, I'm not a scientist here, thank goodness. But I've had, within 3 months of starting that medicine, I had a completely clear scan. And then 3 months after that, I had a clear scan. 3 months after that, I had a clear scan. And my next scan is in May. So every 3 months, I go through the anxiety and the worry of, is the run over? Or do I get to keep on partying for 3 more months? And partying in my world, I do have a 3-year-old and I have a business and I'm foundation, which is so important. And so for me, I just give me as many 3 months as I can take.
So 1 in 8 women will encounter breast cancer diagnosis. You found your first tumor at 31 when you were pregnant. So cancer does not discriminate. And I know you encourage people to check with their
Yes,
doctors.
so there is um the breast cancer community really talks about feeling it on the first. Take yourself to first base. I think it's really important to know that, for me, I do have a genetic mutation. I did receive from my father, and it does predispose me to higher risk of cancer. But less than 10% of all cancers are because of genetics. They're more typically at random. So 1 in 8 women, if you were to count off how many of your Facebook friends are women, and 1 in 8, that's a lot of people. And so I like to think of this as it's not a me problem, it's a we problem. This is a problem that affects all of us.
So let's talk about your career.
Oh, I love talking about my career. Everyone wants to talk about the C word, cancer, not the C word career. Let's do it.
Because I remember, so you started with the Oklahoma Pork Council. I remember getting emails, the newsletter. We don't need to say when that was, but with your name was
Yes.
on it when e-newsletters were popular. Tell me about the experience at Oklahoma Pork and what you did.
Okay, so my first real job out of the gate was at the Oklahoma Pork Council, and I was the director of promotions. That meant they gave me a pretty decent sized budget and said, here, go forth and discuss with consumers. And, um, Oklahoma is an interesting state because we can't sell more pork. Everyone's eating a lot of pork, and it really wouldn't change our market here in the state of Oklahoma. But we are a ballot initiative state, which meant we talked a lot about education. And what I learned in that position, I had a wonderful boss, and I was too creative for my age, I like to say. Like I had big ideas and I didn't really fit in a bubble. And so a lot of times in smaller organizations, they talk about what the advertising agency recommends, which I totally understand. I have a boutique agency now. But what that spurred me to do was actually to leave agriculture for a little bit because I wanted to go see what the agency was like. Like if you want to reference the agency, I'll go be the agency. So from there, I kind of left agriculture for a hot second. I worked for a small agency in Oklahoma City, and I became a travel writer and blogger, which meant I covered concerts and I launched social media before people even knew that you could manage social media professionally. From there, I moved to North Carolina and worked for a bigger agency where I worked with some big brands like North Carolina Tourism. Our agency handled the accounts like National Gypsum, and Belk. And then from there, I hopped right back into agriculture, and I lived in Austin, Texas, working for an agency at that time was called Charleston Orwig. I believe now it's called CO Next. And that is where I got to work on some really fun swine accounts. I was a social media manager for Smithfield Corporate for a hot second. And that's where I had my first really good firsthand experience with misinformation and how to correctly manage a reputation of a company that's really not having at that time the ability online to manage all the conversations that were happening. Um, while in that position, I would say one of the most pivotal parts of my career, I helped launch the influencer program for Bayer Crop Science. And at that time, influencer programs were non-existent. So we created that from scratch, recruited everyone and just really made that a really solid experience. From there, I was recruited to work for an agency that is on their office is on the Boston Harbor, a beautiful office, but I was able to work from home in Nashville, Tennessee. And I worked for an animal pharma company. I don't think they would mind if I said this, Elanco. And I was given the opportunity to manage, from a client services perspective, the rollout of their primary website and all their affiliate websites. And there I did work on the swine team. There I went to World Pork Expo. I spoke to a lot of it. Like I just got really involved in the trenches of what it's like on the producer side in that capacity as well. From there, I moved home to Oklahoma and launched my own company. And very quickly after launching a company, I was actually approached by one of my contacts from my time at Elanco to work with an organization that was called Farming to Fight Hunger. And they worked with a TV show called Chasing Down Madison Brown that you may or may not have seen on RFD TV. And so my role was really unique in that I was the on location ag expert for every episode, making sure that the talent, everyone from a camera operator to the actual talent, had a really good understanding of the agriculture topic at that specific location. And it allowed us to do this really, really fun influencer event. We hosted home runs fighting hunger at Bread and Pork. And we brought influencers from across the country. They were part of the TV show, and they went with Madison into a shower in, shower out barn experience. And there were people who have, at the time, this was a few years ago, but, their social footprint was in the multi-millions. And so it was such a fun, exciting way to have a broader influence and show people that it's really happening on farms and that also we can have fun while farming.
So Oklahoma pork, what was one of your ideas? Like you
Okay. This actually is this is kind of hard to remember because it was a minute ago, but my first day in the office, um, my boss was actually at the Capitol, so he wasn't there. It was in a brand new empty office, and I didn't know what my job was yet. So I launched social media accounts, and I had to backtrack and explain why I thought we should have social media accounts. Um, and one of the things that I quickly did was find all of the food and coupon bloggers in the Oklahoma area and coordinated with them about all of our testing at various grocery stores, taste testing, and really got the word out and got a lot of free publicity for them. It's really hard to think about what my big ideas were then that we maybe did or didn't do. I did have a lot of creative freedom, but it's
your
hard.
mind was going, you had the socials.
Yeah.
Time
Yes.
with Smithfield, the social media, was it very controlled, the message that you had to present?
It wasn't as controlled as you would think, because the times are a little different, right? And it was a corporate account, so it did have a very specific voice. We did get to let it play around with a lot of folks, but a lot of the issues with, Smithfield was just the misinformation about where pork is actually processed. I was wildly, um, I would say, surprised by the amount of people who thought, you know, they were not, hogs weren't harvested on US soil, which was untrue. So, but we did a lot of fun video projects for that client, which was not really something that was happening on social media at that time. It was very new, a lot of food videos for the first time that, I mean, tasty videos, everyone's seen those now. But at the time, those weren't really happening. And so they're pretty ahead of the curve when it came to content creation.
You also touched on influencer events like Farming to Fight Hunger's Pigpen influencer meetup. So
Mm-hmm.
just touch base again. What was that about?
So Bread Pork, if you are familiar with them in Iowa, they actually have a baseball field at their farm, and they hosted a community event where we partnered the event. It was very Field of Dreams with the influencer tour. So influencers not only got to have a baseball team and play on a farm, they also toured the barns. We brought a production crew in because a shower in, shower out facility, they could not take their phones, their cameras, whatever. So we worked with the farm to how can we get our own camera guys in. We'll take all of the footage, we'll take all of the photos that all of the influencers want, and then we'll just give it to them. And so that way they have access to that. We know from a biosecurity standpoint, not anyone can just bring in any equipment. It has to be completely sanitized. And that's a process. And so what if we take on the burden of the time to get something into the facility and then we share it with influencers, making it more accessible? And that was a pivotal part of that being a successful event.
You were an RFD TV consultant.
So I actually, through that Farming to Fight Hunger, I consulted with that TV show that was
Okay.
featured on RFD TV.
And how do you think influencers or changes have influenced the pig industry?
I think influencers in general have changed the way that people consume content. Um, People build a relationship with influencers and they trust what they're saying, much like people historically have trusted news channels. But now we know that there's no three levels of signing off on something before it's posted when you work directly with an influencer or content creator. And so I think content creators can be used very successfully and in the swine industry because people just want to know what's going on. And I think what would be very important for someone who's considering working with an influencer or becoming an influencer is that transparency is the name of the game, and relationships. You know, historically, creating content was just pushing messaging out, and you have to build rapport with your community or it doesn't matter. They're not going to trust you. And so I think that's very different than, the original ag chat days. Things have evolved and it's very relational based.
So you touched on some of the work you've done with swine teams, like companies like Elanco.
Yeah.
Why is that important? I know you talked about you rolled out the new website, but why is that important working with swine teams?
Why is it important to me?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I love swine farmers. I love hog farmers. I think it's geographically, everyone wants to have a different title. Pig farmers. I think it's really important because of all of the subsectors of the agriculture industry. I think swine farming can really become misunderstood because of the biosecurity and the things we have to do to keep our herd safe. And for me, it's very important because there's B2B, there's working with the farmer and all of the components and vendors that they need to be successful farmers. And then there's also, the way that the swine industry is structured. Um, I think it's so important to have conversations with consumers because, gosh, I hate saying this, we're all in this together. It's very 2020 to say, but it's important to know that I wish everyone could trust pig farmers the way I do. And if they could, I think that conversations around pig farming would be very different.
What's your biggest asset and why?
As a person,
Yeah,
and
person, professional.
sure, I would say my biggest asset as a professional in the strategic communications industry is thinking through the whole picture and problem solving things or dead ends that might happen within the course of a project. I think so often we do things simply because someone one time 10 years ago told us we should. And for me, I want to look at other industries and other subsectors of media to say, hey, why can't we do things different? And the questioning and pushback has I would say 99% of the time kept me on a successful track.
And that kind of question takes us to what is rural gone urban? And I know you have a foundation. What is that about as
Yeah.
well?
So Rural Gone Urban is a boutique strategic creative agency. So I offer online courses and one-on-one brand strategy coaching. Whether you are in a corporate communication team or you're a small business owner, my consulting is a little different because it's very hands-on. Um, it's let's work together during a set time period and really come to, let's work towards a solution. Uh, Additionally, I launched the Rural Gone Urban Foundation that supports strong women doing brave things through three pillars. The first is scholarships for B and C students. No hate to straight A students, but I think there's a lot of value and people who maybe can't sit still in class or maybe have a lot of jobs because they need to help support their own lifestyle at 15. And by lifestyle, I mean like lunch money. And so scholarships for those students. Um, Small business grants. I launched the Rural Gone Urban consulting business after I moved home from Nashville while living in an apartment in my dad's horse farm with really spotty Wi-Fi. And it would have been so valuable to have a grant that could have helped me launch then at that time. And then the third pillar is love bombs for women in the ring with cancer. And it's not a fight. There's no win or lose, loser in that situation. I mean, we want the loser to be cancer, but what I mean is we want to gift those women who are in the trenches something that they can really invest in themselves or make memories for their children. Hi, I'm on a Zoom call. Do you want to say hi real fast?
How do you get on that?
I'm just talking into the microphone. So sorry. And
Is that Elsie?
yes, this is Elsie. Can you say hello?
Hello.
Hey, do you remember what we talked about last night?
What?
We talked about what the foundation is. You asked me what the foundation is and what do we need to do for the foundation? Say it loud. Oh,
There's money to put women.
raise money. So we are in a fundraising, fundraising phase of the organization. Okay, I'm gonna talk and you're gonna listen real fast, okay? So in the first 9 months of the organization, our first calendar year, if you will, we did raise $60,000. And so we just awarded $15,000 in scholarships and just launched our Love Bombs. So did I say that correctly? Sorry, I'm distracted by the kids. So $15,000 in scholarships and we just launched our Love Bombs. So we're a little more than a year old and we're already giving back to our community.
So that's the 3 pillars. Now, is it the coolest dang thing ever? Is that how
Oh
you
my
say
gosh,
it? I'm not from the South, so
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, back up, please. Yes, it is. Honestly, I think all the time, what is the biggest silver lining of, I'm so sorry, Elsie, ma'am. Ma'am.
I want to talk.
You can talk in just a second. One second, okay? Let me tell him. And this is where I tell you that our rural childcare options close permanently. So I am a working from home.
well, it's a
mom.
good treat. It's a good treat to see.
Yes. So, but the foundation really is the biggest silver lining of all, because truly, in what world would I have launched a foundation just while being a healthy person? Like, I mean, I could have eventually, it sounds like something I would have done in my 60s or 70s, but now I'm doing it. And most people, this is the real, which I pride myself on being on social media, is sharing what's really happening. And that is so often people graduate to heaven early. And in their absence, people launch a scholarship or they launch something in their honor, which is wonderful. And I hope that my family and friends would have done that had I not been here. But now I get to have a hand in this. I get to make sure that it is really something that up levels to my beliefs and can show my daughter what's important to me.
So
And
we'll
that's
get you
simply all those 3 pillars level up to loving without an asterisk, loving regardless of where someone lives, what they do, whether they're rural, whether they're urban, just in general, showing kindness to the world.
I think that's great. The last question here, we'll get you out of here on this. What did you most learn about yourself and the moment you pivoted from adversity to growth?
I am so much stronger than I ever thought possible. I mean that physically and mentally. I did not know that I could juggle all of the things that could be thrown at me at one time.
So keep being strong, Brooke. Thanks for sharing your story and joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much.